Have you ever wondered what happens when you're left alone to face the darkness? When the sound of the wind rustling through the corn isn't just the wind, but the whispered voice of someone hiding in the shadows tonight. Be careful before you turn off the lights, because the 4 true stories you're about to hear will take you into situations no one ever wants to be in, where darkness becomes a trap and silence is the final warning. Story 1. The Forbidden Field. The Man Among the Cornstalks. When I was a kid, there was one rule my parents drilled into my head over and over, like a sacred warning burned into my memory. No matter what happens, never cut across the cornfield. We lived in Nebraska, surrounded by endless fields that stretched all the way to the horizon. Our house sat on the other side of a large cornfield, and every morning I'd ride my bike around it to get to school. It took longer, but it was safer. No one ever walked through that cornfield, especially not kids. I didn't have a phone, no neighbors nearby. But I was used to being alone. I never questioned the real reason behind that rule. Until one evening. That day on my way home from school, the chain on my bike suddenly popped off. I tried fixing it, but it wouldn't stay on. The sky was already starting to dim, and the long road back home stretched ahead like a dusty, winding path. I stood there looking down the road, then turned to face the towering cornfield beside me, thick and overgrown like a living wall. I knew the shortcut. If I cut through, I'd be home in half the time. I hesitated for a few seconds, then grabbed my broken bike and stepped in. At first, it seemed fine. Narrow trails ran between rows of tall stalks, making it feel like a maze. The corn brushed against my arms, taller than I was, and the air inside felt strangely cool. The wind completely vanished. I started to feel that something was off. Outside sounds were gone. No cars, no birds, nothing. Just the sound of my footsteps, and something else. A faint rustling, but not from the wind. Uneven, like someone walking slowly behind me. I turned around. Nothing. I tried walking faster, but each time I stopped, the sound stopped too. And every time I moved, it came back. My breathing quickened. I told myself it's just a squirrel or a mouse. But when I turned down a different row, my heart nearly stopped. A man was standing right there in the path. His clothes were filthy torn. His arms were covered in long, fresh scratches, like he'd clawed his way through barbed wire. He didn't move, just stared straight at me. Then he spoke. His voice was low and rough, like it came from a scorched throat. "You lost, kid." I froze. He stepped forward, raising his hand slowly, speaking gently. "Let me take you home." That was the moment instinct took over. I dropped my bike and ran. I tore through the rows of corn, tripping over stalks, my arms slashed by razor-sharp leaves. Behind me, I could hear him crashing through the field, the corn snapping, his voice yelling, "Don't run, I'm not gonna hurt you." I didn't stop, didn't look back. I turned down another row and dropped into a crouch, curling myself into a ball, holding my breath. His footsteps grew louder, then stopped, just feet away. Through the leaves, I saw him holding a piece of rope. He was muttering, "Where are you? I'll find you." I don't know how long I hid in that cornfield, but by the time I found my way out, the sun had completely vanished. I stumbled home, shivering limbs, numb mind spinning. My parents were frantic. I told them everything. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went back to look for the bike, but it was gone. It all seemed over, until a few weeks later. I came home from school, and sitting on our front porch was my old bike. No one knew who brought it. No one knew how it got there. But my parents understood, and so did I. Some doors once stepped through. don't always stay shut. The next day we moved, away from the cornfield, away from the whispers in the dark. But deep down, I know no matter where I go, I'll always hear him, still muttering, still looking for me. Story 2. The man at the edge of the cornfield. I was 28 when I returned to my family's farm in Nebraska, where I'd grown up to help care for my aging parents after years of living in the city. Life in the countryside felt slow, quiet, and dull at first, but I desperately needed that silence to find myself again, after letting go of my dream of becoming a writer. It was a vast piece of land surrounded by endless cornfields stretching all the way to the horizon. The nearest neighbor was a 10-minute walk away, an elderly woman who had lived alone since her husband passed. I picked the small room on the 3rd floor of the old farmhouse. From my bedroom window, I could see the entire cornfield every sunset, a view that was both beautiful and overwhelming. But after just a few weeks, things started to change. Every evening around dusk, I began noticing a figure standing silently at the edge of the field between 2 rows of corn, motionless like a scarecrow. At first, I thought it might be the neighbor lady or someone from the next farm over. But the strange thing was, the figure never moved, never waved, never did anything, just stood there, as if watching the house, or watching me. Day after day, the silhouette returned, each time just a little closer than before. Still motionless, still silent, still impossible to tell if it was a man or a woman. One evening after I finished up work in the barn, I turned around and saw the figure standing right by the fence line, close enough that if they spoke, I might hear their breath. But there was no breath, no sound. I slowly stepped closer and called out, "Who's there?" No response. I took a few more steps toward them, and suddenly the figure bolted. They sprinted into the cornfield, vanishing into the stalks like they were never there. The next morning, I went to ask the neighbor about it. She looked alarmed and shook her head, saying she hadn't left the house in weeks due to her health. When I asked about her son, she paused and slowly said he had moved away years ago and no longer lived with her. A chill ran down my spine. Whoever I saw wasn't someone she knew. It was a stranger. Days passed. No more sightings. I thought it was over. Until one night, under a pitch-black sky, the power in the house and barn suddenly cut out. No warning, no explanation. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside to check the breaker box when I heard it. Rustling, coming from the corn. I swung the beam of light toward the field, and I saw him. A bald man with patches of thinning hair, dressed in dirty old overalls, holding something that glinted in the light, a rusted pair of garden shears. He stared at me, unblinking. The corner of his mouth curled into a crooked smile. Then he started running, straight at me. I turned and ran, heart pounding out of my chest. I dove into the corn, trying to lose him in that natural maze. I could hear his heavy breathing behind me, the crunch of footsteps, the sharp whip of corn leaves slapping in the wind. I ducked into a narrow path and crouched low behind the thick stalks, trying not to breathe. He ran past, mumbling something incoherent. But I caught 2 words: will, find. I called the police once I made it back to the house. They came and checked the area. No tracks, no footprints. But someone had poured water into the breaker box to short it out. After that, my parents installed cameras and hired someone to stay on the property overnight. I didn't stay long after that, but I've never forgotten that man's eyes in the dark, the eyes of someone who had nothing left to lose. Story 3. The bicycle that returned from the darkness. When I was a child living in rural Nebraska, every trip to school was a solitary journey. No school bus, no friends to walk with, just me, my rusty old bicycle, and a long road cutting through vast cornfields that seemed to stretch on forever. My parents had one rule, just one: never cut through the cornfield. At the time, I didn't ask why. We didn't have cell phones, and if you got lost in that maze, no one would ever find you. One afternoon, just like any other, I was heading home when the chain on my bike suddenly snapped. I tried everything I could to fix it, but it was no use. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, no help in sight, no signal to call anyone, I looked down the winding road that led home, then turned to face the cornfield. That was the shortcut, the one I had never dared to take. I knew my parents would be furious, but I told myself, just go straight through and you'll come out behind the house. So I wheeled my broken bike between the towering rows of corn. The wind blew gently, but the leaves rustled like whispers threading through the creeping shadows. The light dimmed. The air grew heavy. I didn't know why, but I kept looking over my shoulder, like someone was following me. And then I heard a faint rustling sound. At first I thought it was the wind, but it came again. Steady, rhythmic, intentional. I stopped holding my breath and the noise stopped too. I stepped forward and it started again. Closer this time. It felt like something was stalking me, mirroring every move. Panic started to bubble inside me. But what truly froze me was what I saw when I turned down another row. A man. He stood right in the middle of the path. His clothes were filthy torn and caked in dirt. His arms were covered in long red scratches, as if he'd clawed his way through barbed wire. His eyes were dark, empty. He spoke in a raspy, almost whispering voice. "You lost, kid, I can show you the way." I couldn't move. My body felt paralyzed, like I was under a spell. Then he stepped forward, reaching out with one hand. A loose rope dangled from the other. That snapped me out of it. I dropped the bike and ran. Behind me, he shouted, "Don't run, I'll take you home." I barreled through the corn, turning left then right, no idea where I was going. I dove into a dense patch and crouched down, holding my breath as I heard him stomp past, still muttering, "I'll find him. Gotta find him." I don't know how long I stayed hidden there. The sun dipped below the horizon. The cold crept into my skin, but I didn't dare move. Finally, when everything went quiet, I followed the faint moonlight and found my way out. When I stepped through the front door, my parents were nearly hysterical with worry. I told them everything. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went out to find my bike, but it was gone. A few days later, he bought me a new one. We tried to move on, until a few weeks later, one night after school, I came home to find my old bicycle sitting neatly on the front porch. The seat was still damp with fresh dirt. No one saw who left it. No one knew where it had been. But my dad, the calmest man I knew, locked every window in the house for the first time in his life and quietly said, "Tomorrow, we're leaving this place." And we did. But the man's eyes, the rasp in his voice, and the words, "I'll find him," never left me. Story 4. The Fire in the Dark. I moved to Iowa after a series of personal setbacks, looking for a quiet place to start over. The house I rented was dirt cheap, sitting alone on a patch of open land, no neighbors, no noise. The only thing that bothered me was the massive cornfield less than 10 feet from the back of the house. The old wooden fence behind it wouldn't stop anything if it really wanted to come through. I didn't think much of it. I'd lived in the city, and at first the silence felt like a gift. On cold, windy nights, I'd stand out on the back deck smoking a cigarette, listening to the corn sway in the breeze. Quiet to the point of being unsettling. But then came a night in October, and everything changed. I was smoking like usual when I heard a scream. Shrill, painful, like a child in agony. It came from the field. Without hesitation, I ran inside, grabbed my hunting rifle, and rushed back out. The scream came again, clearer, this time closer. My chest tightened. I shouted, asking if someone needed help, but the only answer was silence. I climbed over the fence and pushed into the corn. The phone flashlight wasn't strong enough. Everything was hazy, freezing. I called out again. No response. 10 minutes. 20. No footprints. No sound. Nothing. That's when I stopped walking and realized, if this was a prank, it was a cruel one. I headed back and called the police. They arrived and searched the field with me for 30 minutes. No screams, no tracks, no sign that anyone had ever been there. They left with a warning. If you hear it again, call us immediately. I was still shaken when I got home, but the worst part was yet to come. When I reached my bedroom on the second floor, my eyes drifted toward the window, and I froze. Out in the field, just a few dozen yards from the house, were flames. A fire burning in the cold October night in the very place I had just come from. I panicked, called 911 again, grabbed the garden hose and sprinted toward the fire. It hadn't spread far, but the wind was strong. I had to put it out. I sprayed water over the flames, my hands shaking from fear and the cold. Just as I thought I had it under control, I saw him, a figure standing in the window of my bedroom. Someone was inside my house. I dropped the hose and ran full speed to the front door. I pushed it open and stopped dead in my tracks. Everything inside had been ransacked. The fridge door swung wide open. Broken dishes covered the floor. Chairs were overturned. The entire place looked like someone had torn through it in a fit of rage. Then I heard the front door slam shut behind me. I ran back out, scanned the yard. No one. No footprints. No shadows. But I knew. Whoever it was had been in my bedroom watching me from the window while I fought the fire. When the cops and firefighters came back, they took it far more seriously. An investigation was launched. They used scanners, dogs, even thermal imaging lights, but found nothing. They did discover what caused the fire. A trail of spilled oil leading from the tree line to the fire's origin. There was no doubt. It was arson. I couldn't sleep after that night. Every sound, every gust of wind made me reach for the gun. I lived in a constant state of alert until I could save enough money to leave. To this day, I still don't know if the scream that night was real or bait. But what I do know beyond all doubt is that someone lured me out, set the fire, and then silently stepped into my home, stood in my window, and left me with one chilling message: I can come back. Anytime. If you can still hear the sounds around you, congratulations, you're still safe. But remember this: the dark never truly sleeps. And sometimes what's watching you from the cornfield isn't just the wind rustling through the leaves. Turn on the light before you step out of your room, and never ignore the sound coming from a place that should be silent. You're watching your channel name. Hit subscribe, like, and share if you still have the nerve after what you've just heard. We'll be back with stories far more terrifying than this.